You're watching Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall, a live depiction of the traffic in the Strait of Hormuz coming from marine traffic. We continue to watch this as we're hearing of more kinetic action in the Strait. President Trump saying that Iran committed a foolish violation of their deal after they say Iran fired at a ship, damaging its upper deck, and a number of other projectiles were also intercepted by the Americans. The president said that, he wouldn't really give us a yes or a no as to whether or not the U.S. would respond to the attack. Well, we now know that the U.S. has responded. They struck Iranian missile and drone storage locations as well as coastal radar sites. And we are still monitoring the region for any more activity that may happen as the night moves forward. Let's bring in Lieutenant General Karen Gibson. She's a former U.S. CENTCOM Intel Director. I think a lot of questions that people might have about this, at least at this hour, is, well, the U.S. responded to Iran. What's the likelihood that we see Iran respond to the U.S.'s response?
Yeah, that's a great question, Austin. But I'd actually like to go back to the start of this incident, to Iran's unprovoked attack against a civilian vessel that was transiting the Straits of Hormuz. I think that should put to bed any misconceptions that Iran is negotiating in good faith on the provisions of the MOU. And I think that they were gambling in the sense that I think they were trying to make a statement without provoking retaliation. I think they were trying to make a statement that they do, in fact, insist that they play a role in managing traffic in the Straits of Hormuz, that they seek to establish a regime on their terms, and that going forward, they will have a say in which vessels pass, when, at what times, et cetera. And that is absolutely not, consistent with even international law or the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. And so I think, again, just really a sign that they do not intend to negotiate in good faith. And I think they did not expect retaliation. They don't want to get onto an escalatory tit for tat like we were doing earlier in the month of June. I think they thought that if it didn't incur any casualties and if it wasn't against an American vessel, that they could perhaps make this statement without inviting response. Our response, very proportional and very conditioned on things specifically that could threaten vessels as they're transiting the strait. We're not striking deeper into Iran. We're not hitting mixed dual-use military-civilian targets. We're not hitting leadership or symbolic targets. We're specifically taking out assets that could be used to attack vessels as they come through. Now, whether it remains to be seen whether or not they respond, they tend to respond proportionally. But I think we should look at the implications of this, even if it ends right now. The most immediate implication is that it's suspended or delayed the effort to try to rescue some of the stranded mariners that have been stuck in the Gulf for a long time. I do believe they'll eventually get out, but this is going to slow it down. More importantly, though, I think it really disrupts our ability to return to normal commerce and navigation across the Gulf, because shippers and the firms that insure them want to make sure that safe travel is routine, not episodic. And that is one of the things that actually concerns me, along with, again, Iran's mistrustful activities. Those are the two things that bother me the most about this.
So Jennifer Griffin says that the U.S. military strikes targeting Iran are complete for tonight. So we don't expect there to be anything more from the U.S. military. Of course, we're still going to be keeping a close eye on the region just in case we do see something else take place. A live look at the White House where it's approaching 7:15 in the nation's capital. This memorandum of understanding, and Trump was not shy about saying that this was a blatant violation. Why could the Iranians possibly have fired at that cargo ship in the Strait yesterday?
So again, I think they are trying to enforce their own rules of how vessels are going to transit there going forward. And I think if nothing else, it's going to be some time before we see insurance premiums return to normal levels, if at all, because what they're doing is they're demonstrating that there may always be a risk of sailing through the straits unless you are complying with Iran's demands. In terms of the MOU, this is only one of many challenges that we've faced already and that we will face in the future. We've talked, I think, perhaps before about challenges to implementation, to verification, to enforcement. But one of the chief challenges that becomes even before you try to implement it or while you're trying to implement it is differing interpretations of what it means. The language is frankly looser and more subject to interpretation than the kinds of negotiations that are carefully negotiated over a long period of time, like the JCPOA under the Obama administration or the START Treaty under Ronald Reagan's tenure. Those kinds of negotiations that are lock solid and durable take a long time and are not ambiguous.
Why is it not in the interest of either of the belligerents in this case to not return to full-on kinetic activity?
Oh, well, okay. So, one thing, I think that Iran's strategy all along has been to make this war so politically and economically infeasible for us that we are compelled to come to a negotiation and concede to things that are in their favor. And this is consistent with their desire to make it economically infeasible for us. I think they see economic vulnerability. I'm not saying they're right, but they think that economics and a desire to return to normal actions in the Strait is one of our key vulnerabilities. When we have this kind of kinetic action, this back and forth tit for tat, in the Middle East, it does disrupt the global economy. And domestically, that matters. I'm not a domestic political analyst, but you'll hear a lot from those kind of folks about upcoming midterms, price of gas, inflation, things that hit Americans more directly at home than any Iranian missile or drone, since we are far out of range of those.
And what's worth tracking in the next day or two? The memorandum of understanding still holds. It's not like and I see you reacting to that. Has it held? How do we define that at this moment?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and it's a tricky one to answer. I think if the negotiations continue to go forward, then in a sense it's held. But we do have these competing, it appears perhaps irreconcilable visions of what transit in the Gulf looks like, or what a ceasefire looks like. If the technical negotiations that occur between our staffs continue, that would be a positive development. But I really think at this point, Iran needs to let more vessels go through, well, all vessels, transit the straits unmolested. That's really critical. And if that doesn't happen, then I think we will be back on a kind of escalatory tit for tat.
General Gibson, appreciate the time. Thanks.